Hello. Today we're going to take a look at how public policy regarding education is created and why it is important. This is such an important topic for educators to understand, and unfortunately, many don't know much about it. Teaching is such a difficult job. There are always demands on educators to create curriculum, have engaging lessons, make sure that IEP accommodations are being met, and ensuring that we are connecting with our students. It is easy to overlook how educational policy is made because honestly, many teachers don't feel like they have much of a say in what happens from a policy perspective. Before learning more about how public policy is created, I felt this way, but have since realized that I was wrong. Public policy is so important for teachers to pay attention to, and more importantly, influence. At the beginning of this course, when asked who creates public policy, my answer included the following stakeholders: the school board, the superintendent, state standards, the Pennsylvania Department of Education, taxpayers, principals, the Common Core, and the U.S. Department of Education. While I was not wrong per se, I didn't have a good grasp of who all the stakeholders were and what their role was in helping to form public policy. Public policy regarding education has evolved greatly over time, beginning with our nation's first school boards and the theories of John Dewey, to today's complex policy machine that involves all levels of government working in nuanced coordination. As I have learned, public policy is formed at all levels of government: local, state, and federal. All have different roles to play, and the way in which they interact is important. The federal government can create mandates or public policy initiatives, and whether or not schools receive federal funding is based on how they respond to these mandates. The state may help schools implement these mandates, but at the same time, they have additional control over our schools. They create policy that determines further how schools are funded, how teachers are certified and evaluated, and additionally, what certain programs look like. At the local level, individual school boards actually write and create policies so that individual school districts can implement federal and state initiatives. Local school boards also make curricular decisions and implement school-specific programs. If any level of government in the system is out of sync, it could mean bad things for public schools. While all of this is happening within government, there are outside influences that also contribute to the policy being created. Third-party special interest groups such as unions and lobbyists try to influence policy by working with elected officials. Elected officials work to enact the will of their constituents by proposing legislation and voting for legislation that may add or subtract benefits from public schools. There is also public opinion, which can influence the way that decision makers act. The public votes for the elected officials, who in turn help to create the policy. Research organizations and think tanks can also influence public policy by generating information on how U.S. public schools are performing both domestically and internationally. The data that these research organizations and think tanks generate put a lot of pressure on public policy so that U.S. schools are competitive internationally while still meeting the needs of the U.S. economy. There are so many factors that influence how policy is made for our public schools, and many of the factors often go unrealized by educators working in the public school system. I believe it goes unrealized because it can happen at such a large scale that it is easy to miss. But as mentioned previously, educators typically have so much on their plates that it is easy to become overwhelmed by the complexity and importance of public policy making. So, why is it important for educators and others to understand the system? The simple answer to this question is because it impacts them greatly. Educators are one that are working closest with students and generally have the best idea of what a student goes through on a day-to-day basis. Who best to advocate for students than educators who know what they're going through? While those who are working in government, in unions, and think tanks, and other influences of public policy may believe they have the best interest of our students in mind, how can they really know? Educators are the experts and need to take their seat at the table. We cannot leave the regulation of our profession up to those who are not necessarily working in the profession. And we therefore have a duty to influence public policy to the extent that we can. By understanding how public policy is made, educators have the ability to influence public policy. While many teachers are aware of their ability to speak out at school board meetings, in many situations, waiting until a policy is created at the school district level may be too late. At this point, the policy may have already been created at the federal or state level, and the local implementation of the policy may simply be a formality. Speaking out at a school board meeting and advocating for the best education for our students is important when it is appropriate, but so is advocating in other ways. Being an informed voter, speaking out in public policy is proposed, and supporting causes that support public education, think tanks, unions, elected officials, and other third parties is a great way to ensure job security, but also a great way to make sure that the students that we serve are being taken into consideration and benefited. While it may seem daunting to get involved at higher levels of government, it is worth it. Simply being informed about the decisions that are being made and signing petitions, informing others, and championing causes are simple ways that individuals can enact change at the federal or state level. If educators do not understand how public policy is created, they are essentially helpless in advocating for their students and improving the effectiveness of public policy. In today's society, being uninformed is not a choice that one should make, especially in the industry as regulated and politicized as public education.